The story begins with a 20-year-old boy named Will Hunting. He lives in a very poor neighborhood, but he works at the world's most famous university, MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It sounds very good to hear, but the reality is that Will doesn't study there. He only cleans the university buildings. One day, while he is cleaning the hallway, his eyes fall on a very difficult math problem written on the board. This problem was written by Professor Lambeau. He had challenged the entire college that whoever solves this problem, his name will be printed in the university books, and he will earn both fame and respect. Will looks carefully at the problem and gets stuck on it. The whole day he keeps thinking about that problem. Even when he is at the bar with his friends, his mind remains tangled in the same problem. Suddenly, he leaves his friends and goes straight to his small, old house so that he can sit all night and try to solve that problem. At home, he doesn't have a board, so he writes the solution on the bathroom mirror and keeps erasing mistakes and trying again. After many hours, he finally solves the problem. A few days later, when he goes to work, while cleaning, he writes the correct solution on the board. And when Professor Lambeau sees the correct solution written on the board, he is shocked. He cannot believe that one of his students solved such a difficult problem so quickly. He becomes restless to know who this genius is. That same evening, Will is out with his friends. On the way, they meet some people. One of the boys makes fun of a girl. Will recognizes that boy. He was the same person who used to bother him a lot in childhood. In anger, Will tells his friend to stop the car, and without thinking, he gets down and directly attacks him. Will punches him, and within moments, a fight starts between both groups. After a while, the police arrive there. Will's friends try to drag him away to save him, but by then, it is too late. The police arrest Will. The next morning, Professor Lambeau is giving a lecture to his students. Everyone's eyes are on him because they all want to know who solved that very difficult problem. But in the class, no one answers this. The professor, a little disappointed, says that if someone has solved the last problem, then now I will give you an even harder one. He explains that this is the same problem on which he and his colleagues have been working for the past 2 years, and now that same problem is written on the board. Meanwhile, Will comes out of the police station and tells his friends that his court date is next week. In the evening, he goes to his job again and sees another easy problem written on the board. He quickly starts solving it so that no one sees him. Just then, Professor Lambeau comes out of his office and sees Will writing on the board. He angrily asks, "What are you doing here?" Will immediately apologizes and steps back. The professor thinks this boy is some mischief maker who is just writing nonsense on the board. He tries to catch him, but Will quickly disappears from there. When the professor looks at the board again, he realizes that the correct answer is written there. Seeing this, he is stunned. In the evening, after finishing work, Will goes to the bar with his friends and tells them that he has been fired from his job. Now he won't be able to go inside the university and solve problems. His friends ask, "Why did they fire you?" So Will jokes and says, "Management just made some changes." The next day, Professor Lambeau decides that he will now find this mysterious genius. He goes straight to the janitor's office and asks for the name of the boy who works there. But the staff there think that the professor has come to complain about the cleaning, so they don't tell him Will's name immediately. A little while later, it is revealed that Will wasn't doing the cleaning job at MIT by choice, but rather it was community service given by the court. Now the day has come for his case hearing. Professor Lambeau is also present in court. Everyone sees that Will is fighting his case by himself. He shows so much knowledge about law and society that everyone is shocked. But he has too many old cases against him. So the judge sends him to jail and sets bail at $50,000. Some time later, Professor Lambeau comes to meet Will in jail. He tells him that the judge has allowed him to be released from jail, but with 2 conditions. First, Will must study with the professor every week. Second, he must meet with a psychologist every week so that his anger and criminal habits can be reduced. Will feels he doesn't need a psychologist at all, but to gain his freedom, he agrees to this condition. After being released from jail, he starts studying with the professor and easily solves the hardest problems. The professor is very impressed seeing his ability, but therapy isn't that easy. The professor calls many different doctors, but no one can handle Will. The first doctor actually gets scared because Will makes fun of the book he wrote. Will says he read his book in one night and there was nothing special in it. Hearing this, the doctor gets angry and leaves the session. The second psychologist tried a different way to handle Will. He tried to put him under hypnosis and make him sleep, but this method also doesn't work. Seeing this, Professor Lambeau almost gives up. Then he remembers his old college friend Sean Maguire, who is now a psychologist. The professor goes to Sean's office, tells him about Will, and invites him to discuss it together at a restaurant. At first Sean refuses, because his schedule is very busy. But Professor Lambeau explains that Will is no ordinary boy, he is a genius on another level. He compares him to the famous mathematician who made great discoveries without any formal education. Hearing this, Sean finally agrees to meet Will. In the first session, as always, Will tries to trouble the doctor with rudeness and jokes. He even makes fun of a painting Sean had made, saying it is absolutely worthless. Sean doesn't get angry at this and stays calm. But when Will makes fun of his personal life and his wife, Sean loses his temper badly. In a harsh tone, he says, "If you ever mention my wife's name again, I will destroy you." And with this, he ends the session. Later, when Professor Lambeau sees that Sean is upset, he tells him that if he wants, he can drop this case. But Sean clearly says that he will definitely meet Will again next week. After the first session, Sean keeps thinking about Will's words, especially when he mentioned his wife. These memories make him feel lonely. Meanwhile, Will moves a little forward in his life. He goes on a date with a girl he met at the bar, Skylar. Skylar tells him that she inherited a lot of money from her father and is thinking about enrolling at Stanford University. They spend a very good evening together and finally kiss at a diner. Now comes the second therapy session. This time Sean doesn't take Will to his office, but instead to a park bench. As soon as Will starts his usual jokes and sarcastic comments, Sean stops him. Sean says that he has thought a lot about Will's words, and now he has something to say. He explains that even though Will is very educated and intelligent, he doesn't know anything about real life. He may know everything about artists from books, but he has never left Boston to see their real artworks. He can recite books written about war, but he has never seen a battlefield. He can recite poems about love, but he has never truly loved a woman nor completely opened himself up to her. And the most important thing, until Will himself expresses the pain in his heart, no one can ever understand what it feels like to be an orphan. Sean says that none of this can be learned from books. Real lessons are taught only by life itself. In the next session, Will stays silent the whole time. He sits quietly because he knows he is just testing Sean, and Sean proves him right. In the very next session, Will breaks his silence and tells Sean a dirty joke. After this, both of them start having light-hearted conversations. Will even tells him about his date. Sean asks if he will meet Skylar again. Then Will admits a truth. He says maybe not, because he doesn't want the perfect image of him that Skylar has in her eyes to be broken. But Sean explains that in reality, Will is afraid of his own created perfect image, not of the girl. In real relationships, one has to accept each other's flaws and habits. Sean tells the story of his wife, who had recently passed away due to cancer. He says that what he misses most are her small habits and quirks. Real love and closeness only happen when we accept a person with their flaws. For the first time, Will listens carefully. On the other side, Will goes to meet Skylar at her dorm. Skylar is surprised, because Will hadn't called her in a long time, but she agrees to go out. The next day, both of them go to see a dog race and spend a wonderful time together. Skylar asks Will where he grew up. Will hides the truth and jokingly says he has 12 older brothers. Skylar laughs and says that's a lie, but Will swears to make the story funnier. He even has to promise that he will soon introduce Skylar to his family. After this, Skylar asks Will how someone can know if they are truly their soulmate. This question gets stuck in Will's mind, and the next day he asks Sean the same thing. Sean smiles and says he understood at first sight when he saw his wife. Then he tells a story. One time, he got tickets to a very rare baseball game, but he skipped that game because that same day he met a beautiful girl at a bar. Sean says he still has no regrets about missing that game. Skylar keeps insisting that Will introduce her to his real family, but Will still avoids telling the truth. So at least he decides to introduce her to his friends. Skylar easily blends into their group. She jokes with everyone and drinks beer with them. But at the end of the night, one of Chucky's comments spoils Will's mood. Meanwhile, Professor Lambeau meets Sean at a diner and asks questions about Will's therapy. In reality, Lambeau doesn't care about Will's past. He just wants to know what Will do next under his guidance. To this, Sean says he won't pressure Will, because Will has to decide for himself what he wants in life. Hearing this, Lambeau gets angry and says he has already arranged meetings for Will with big people. But what he doesn't know is that instead of Will, his friend Chucky went to meet those people. There, Chucky demands money and, with his rude behavior, ruins the whole deal. Meanwhile, Will and Skylar spend a romantic evening together, and their relationship deepens further. At her house, Skylar asks Will directly. She says she has to go to California to study at Stanford and wants Will to come with her. But Will immediately refuses and makes different excuses. Skylar explains that he is just stuck in his small world, where he faces no challenges and is afraid of new things. Hearing this, Will gets angry. He feels Skylar is just joking with him and that for her, he is just a time pass because he is poor. Skylar, shocked, asks why he is so stressed about money. She says, crying, that if she had to choose between her wealthy father's fortune and her father himself, she would always choose her father, not the money. Skylar clearly says that she is scared too, but at least she is honest with Will. Will argues again. Then Skylar remembers that Will had repeatedly told her the false story about his 12 brothers. Now Will completely loses his temper and starts shouting. He says Skylar will never want to know his real life because the truth is that he is an orphan, and in childhood people treated him very badly. Skylar, with tearful eyes, assures him that she wants to know everything about him, no matter how painful. Finally, Skylar opens her heart and says she loves him. But Will's heart is already closed, and in a cold voice, he says, I don't love you. After this, Will meets Professor Lambeau. Lambeau is angry because Will's actions ruined the meeting with business partners. Will bursts out in anger and says he is not even sure if he really wants this academic career. Now the conversations between Will and Professor Lambeau become more difficult, because Will's sharp words make Lambeau feel small. Lambeau says he at least expected some gratitude from Will. They argue, and Will leaves angrily. Some time later, Will is called for a job at the National Security Agency, NSA, where he is promised a bright career. But Will flatly refuses. He says he doesn't want to ruin an ordinary person's life just for political games. After this, Will meets Sean again. Sean asks why he rejected the NSA job. Will laughs and says, I'm just waiting for a better offer. Sean, who is his psychologist, asks Will if he has any friend he can share his heart with, or if he ever feels lonely. Instead of answering, Will starts listing famous philosophers' names. Then Sean explains that real relationships can only be made with living people. Sean asks again, if Will is really serious about his future, then what does he want? Will jokingly says that he doesn't mind laying bricks or becoming a shepherd. Sean realizes Will is just joking and running away from his truth. Angry, Sean throws him out of his office. Will is shocked as to why he was thrown out. Then Sean clearly says, because you are not answering honestly, you're just hiding your real self. While talking, Will asks Sean, you talk about your life partner, but where is your wife? Sean calmly replies, she is no longer in this world. Time passes, and Will calls Skylar. But Skylar has already stopped waiting for him because Will never makes any firm decision. For the last time, Skylar says, I love you, take care of yourself, and then she leaves for California. Meanwhile, Will starts working construction in Boston with his friend Chucky. On the other side, Professor Lambeau says over the phone that Will is no longer fulfilling his responsibility. If he reports to the judge that Will is not attending his sessions, then Will go back to jail, and this time Lambeau's conscience will also be clear. During a break at work, Chucky asks Will what he is going to do in life. Will jokes and says he doesn't want to solve math problems in a lab like a rat, but instead he just wants to stay in Boston and hang out with his friends. But this time, Chucky openly scolds Will. He says Will is wasting his talent. Chucky even admits that every day, he wishes that one day Will leaves his house and builds his real life. Meanwhile, Lambeau learns that Will is no longer attending therapy with Sean. In anger, Lambeau threatens Sean that he will tell the judge everything and accuses Sean of pushing Will back toward crime. Sean tells Professor Lambeau that he doesn't care if people laugh at him, but he cannot ignore Will's emotions. Sean says that Lambeau never knew how to accept real love, and that is why he has remained alone his whole life. But Lambeau doesn't want to listen. He feels Sean is jealous of his success. Hearing this, Sean is shocked and feels Lambeau is just arrogant. Sean explains that he only cares about Will's future and his true desires, while Lambeau's pressure could ruin him. At this point, Lambeau quietly leaves and leaves Will alone with Sean. Sean tells Will that his fight with Lambeau isn't personal but is connected to old matters. Then Sean changes the subject and tells Will that he has prepared a report about him for the judge. Will asks if there were other patients like him who came to Sean. At this moment, Sean shares his personal life for the first time. He tells Will that his father was an alcoholic who used to beat him a lot. He tells Will that whatever happened to him was not his fault. At first, Will tries to joke and avoid the matter, but then suddenly he breaks down and pours out his true feelings. Finally, everything becomes clear, that his father was an alcoholic who used to beat him badly in childhood. Will comes to Sean for his last session and tells him that he has decided to join one of the companies suggested by Professor Lambeau, and he is happy with this decision. Sean also says that he has decided to travel the world a little, and before leaving, he gives Will his phone number. In the evening, Will celebrates his birthday with his friends. His friends gift him a car that they built from old parts. Meanwhile, Professor Lambeau comes to meet Sean. Both of them apologize to each other, and then they go out to a bar to have a drink together. On the other side, as always, Chucky comes to pick up Will. But this time he sees that Will is not at home. Seeing this, Chucky becomes very happy, just as he had always wanted in his dreams. Will had left a note for Sean. Sean reads it and learns that Will has left the job and gone to California to be with Skylar. In that note, Will had written the same line that Sean once told his friends, when he left the baseball game to go meet the woman who would become his wife. And in this beautiful way, the story ends. Your thoughts matter, share them in the comments. And if you had fun, show some love with a like and hit subscribe for more.